saw, and
So,
like, well,
we began cleaning up the attic.
the director doesn't care, so he actually, he's like, you have to get out there. I'm thinking, like, we left it for like a couple of weeks to one of Jency's nephews, you know, for band tryouts, so he didn't like it, so he was back, so I think it's been, spread some place.
So, cleaning up.
We need an elevator,
You know,
Kelly, Dave and Johnny.
Oh,
gosh.
The prestige. Look for interviews.
Making the talk show
Oh, yeah.
circuit.
But it takes some, it's professional picture made, so that's nice.
She is with kids and grandkids.
I mean, but that's the worship.
Especially, she was the only one that left it ready.
Doing the best we can, right? How are you doing?
I was like, it's like 20. Don't have a phone book at some point. Come on, you're
Oh,
right.
no, it used to be, that's it.
It's also not just Jackson, it's all over West Tennessee, so I don't
There's
know
only a couple days a year.
if that.
Maybe they're
You don't
trying to
have to
make
use one to the other.
Yeah, you're right.
Thank you.
More people buying a little
Trying
thing,
to adjust.
congratulations ads, a little put out to work.
They get ready to go and just have it. Show me something to do with that. It's been weeks since my last signature, and it's long. Well, I think it's gonna take time.
Dave, I see you projected
You won't have to spend much money on
one seat.
I was trying to look at positive things.
Yeah.
That was one of them, you know? And she-
After a little bit of a slow start, they come on strong. Right now, we're a basketball school.
I
Yeah.
watched that night.
We're not any good at football.
It'll be real crazy in the morning.
Tigers aren't any good at basketball.
Oh, yeah,
I
varsity.
definitely did that. I had a curly for a long
We'll
time.
know this after.
I'd wash it at night and just get up and kind of spray it.
Chance if we
And
get
it dried real quick.
conference tournament, bigger chance if we don't. Taking 10 out of 13 teams.
Harper guy.
Well, y'all be ready.
You can come watch some good football coming up weekend. First two rounds of the national tournament.
I've been, I don't keep up with it, but I heard it go a lot like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, both on our team have number one
Oh,
seed.
that's right.
Okay.
You went down to the.
Yeah.
The guys are fun. I don't know how to throw.
I could.
I'd rather take 5 in, 5 out.
Okay.
So there's like two teams, there's like no number one dog on the team. I don't know how to.
Thinking about the season, way to manage it, is to keep.
But they just wear it.
How awkward that was, to stand right there, doing my stuff.
Yeah.
I don't wanna miss anything.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, they were there yesterday. No.
Could go more. I think now is trying to keep.
I still know some of it. Get some updates.
When do they come out? Seeds. What, with the seeds, the seed returns?
Oh, I think it's,
See, this is my second semester on track. My last year.
Joe Lenard's office.
Opened up his big track. My track used to be around the football. They opened nice this year.
When I go to the beach, I got a long sleeve shirt on.
Like a contractor or something.
Yeah. We just like I guess the old people should.
Unless you know the track's gonna be in good shape. It's not always the case.
The last few times we've been.
They're still young. They got a brain.
Well. Until I can fit in, I'll say it that way.
perfect timing. Well, good morning. We'll go ahead and get started. I had a video that I was gonna play for anybody that was late. I was the late one today, so we're not gonna show the video. It's basically just recapping what we're gonna talk about today, but how was everybody? I feel our discussion day is gonna be lively. That's good. Everybody do okay with the time change?
Love it.
I like the longer days. I always have this irrational fear that even though I change my clock and my phone changes automatically, that it's not gonna work for some reason. And those fears were elevated today because teaching, I didn't even an hour late, so. We're gonna discuss the whole chapter of Acts 24, this morning. Blake agreed to let me, he was supposed to go the last portion of that, but I just felt like it flowed better just to discuss the whole chapter. Last time I taught, I mentioned that I read what was assigned, and I just thought, well, that's it. That's what happened. I don't know what else there's to talk about. I don't know what there is to take away from that. And I felt the same way about Acts 24 until I started digging in, and as we do in this class, look at the extra biblical sources around it and dive deeper into the people. It's a fascinating study. I think you guys are going to enjoy it. So, of course, our theme verse, Acts 1, about being witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria, into the earth. So somebody tell me, Derek, what happened last week?
Well, we get an ask one more shit,
Okay.
What happened in this class, or what happened?
Yes, specifically. Whatever you want to offer up. I did hear that we had the president of Free Harvard, the new president here, so we must be doing something right. If he shows up to our class. Review, yeah, that's great. That's good. Well, in Acts 23, Paul gives a speech before the Sanhedrin, right? And the Sanhedrin consists of Pharisees and Sadducees. And what does Paul bring up that causes a stir among them? The resurrection. And so that kind of gets the distraction off of him, creates this big stir. The commander thinks Paul's going to die down there. And so the Roman commander goes in there and gets him. And then what do some Jews plan to do?
Think about it, kill him.
They vow to kill him. They said, we're not going to eat or drink until we kill him. And so they go to the Sanhedrin and say, hey, convince the commander to bring Paul back. We want to talk with him some more. But when he's on the way, we're gonna stake out. We're gonna kill him. It seems like the chief priests and the elders, I mean, they presented their plan to him. I mean, it doesn't say whether or not they were going to do it, but it seems like they were probably open to it. And then we hear about Paul's nephew. It's one of the only references to his family that we see. So he must have had a sister, the text says, heard about the plan and told the commander. And so the commander commissioned about 470 soldiers to go with him. It's the third hour of the night, middle of the night, to go to Caesarea and bring him to Felix. And so that's what's happened. So Acts 24 starts. Paul is already in Caesarea, and then the Jewish leaders are going to come to Caesarea as well, and that's where we start. So let's just start right here and work our way around the room. It's the whole chapter. It's not too long, so we should be able to get through it. So, Derek, you want to start us off?
5 days later, the high priest Ananias went down to Caesarea with some of the elders and a lawyer named Tertullus, and they brought their charges against Paul before the governor. When Paul was called in, Tertullus presented his case before Felix. We have enjoyed a long period of peace unto you, and your foresight has brought about reforms in this nation.
Everywhere and every way, most excellent Felix, we acknowledge that this with profound gratitude. But in order not to weary you further, I would request that you be kind enough to hear us briefly. We have found this man to be a troublemaker, stirring up riots among the Jews all over the world. He is a ringleader of the Nazarene sect.
And even tried to desecrate the temple, so we seized him. By examining him yourself, you will be able to learn the truth about all of these charges we are bringing against him. The other Jews joined in the accusation, asserting that these things
didn't leave verse 7 out, it's not in there, some of your Bibles might have that, they think that verse 7 was added later, a few centuries later, so that's why that's there.
When the governor motioned for him to speak, Paul replied, I know that for a number of years you have been a judge over this nation, so I gladly make my defense. You can easily verify that no more than 12 days ago I went up to Jerusalem to worship. My accusers did not find me arguing with anyone at the temple, or stirring up a crowd in the synagogue, or anywhere else in the city.
And they cannot prove to me the charges they are now making against me. However, I admit that I worship the God of our ancestors as a follower of the way, which they call a sect. I believe everything that is in accordance with the law and that is written in the prophets.
And I have the same hope in God as these men themselves have, that there will be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked. So I strive always to keep my conscience clear before God and man. After an absence of several years, I came to Jerusalem to bring my people gifts for the poor into the present offerings.
I was ceremonially clean when they found me in the temple courts doing this. There was no crowd with me, nor was I involved in any disturbance. But there are some Jews from the province of Asia who ought to be here before you and bring charges if they have anything against me.
For these who are here should state what crimes they found in me when I stood before the Sanhedrin. Unless it was this one thing I shouted as I stood in their presence. It is concerning the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you today.
Then Felix, who was well acquainted with the way, adjourned the proceedings. When Lysias the commander comes, he said, I will decide your case. He ordered the centurion to keep Paul under guard, but to give him some freedom and permit his friends to take care of his needs.
Several days after Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was a Jewess, he sent for Paul and listened to him as he spoke about faith in Christ Jesus. As Paul talked about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and said, That's enough for now. You may leave. When I find it convenient, I will send for you.
At the same time, he was hoping that Paul would offer him a bribe. So he sent for him frequently and talked with him. When 2 years had passed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus. And because Felix wanted to grant a favor to the Jews, he left Paul in prison.
Okay. What did you guys notice? What stood out to you?
The Jewish participants there really appealed to his sense of ego when they started.
Yeah.
They really invented.
To the judge, or Felix?
I mean,
Yeah.
flattery is the word I was looking
Yeah.
for. Yeah, I mean, they really laid it on pretty thick.
He was a lawyer.
He was a lawyer.
That explains a lot.
Yeah. We'll actually get into that.
It seems like it's a really big deal, like it shouldn't have been this big of a deal. But like they're traveling great distances, lots of people, and it's, seems like it should have just been a minor incident.
You've got the chief priests and the elders of Jerusalem taking a 2 to 3 day trip to Caesarea to try to convict this person.
And then the commander of the whole thing is coming too.
Yeah,
So it's like, wow.
it's a big deal. In their eyes. Yeah. Okay, first thing I noticed, it says 5 days later the high priest Ananias went down to Caesarea. And I used this map last time I taught, and I said, well, to me, cardinal direction, that looks like north. Is Luke wrong? Is the map wrong?
You're referring to elevation.
Elevation, yeah.
You know, the Jews at this point, you might want to call it a Christian delusion syndrome. Kind of like we have Trump delusion syndrome now, or is it Trump, TDS, what is it? What stands for Trump?
Oh, deranged.
Trump derangement syndrome. Well, they got Christian derangement syndrome. It's just a hatred for the fact that they don't agree with their own policies or something new. And they just hate it so much it kind of messes with their mind. They just have to.
Paul seems like a threat to their power and their livelihood. And so they're willing to do whatever it takes to diminish that. And so, yeah, it's elevation. Jerusalem's about 2,500 feet above sea level. Obviously, Caesarea is at sea level. Jesus says the same thing in the Gospels. He said, we're getting ready to go up to Jerusalem, even though he was in Jericho. So anytime they say up or down in our text, elevation, not cardinal direction. I just didn't want you to think that my math was wrong. Okay, before we go any further, I want to talk about some of these people in the first two verses. And this is where we'll spend quite a bit of time, and then we'll get to the case that Tertullus makes as well as Paul. But Ananias, anybody know anything about Ananias the high priest? I didn't know anything about it. I also didn't know that at this time, the Romans would pick the high priest. And when I read that, I thought that's not true. There's no way that's the case. And multiple sources verified that. So Ananias the high priest was chosen by Herod, king of Chalcis. And so I think this was kind of a give and take. Remember, the Romans are okay with the Jews having their place and having their customs, but there are certain things they had to give and take. And so one of those might be, well, we get to choose your high priest. And so what do you think that led to? Good, God-fearing, Jewish high priests? Who do you think they picked? People who are loyal to God or loyal to Romans? And we'll see how that impacted Ananias' processes, his thoughts, his beliefs, his actions. He also was known to take tithes by force, so he was violent. He was also a great hoarder up of money. I read a lot of Josephus for this, so it's not spirit-filled, but he was a reputable historian at the time. You guys have heard of Josephus. And so listen to what Josephus said about Ananias in the Antiquities of the Jews. He, talking about Ananias, also had servants who were very wicked. Not only he was wicked, but his servants were, who joined themselves to the boldest sort of the people and went to the threshing floors and took away the tithes that belonged to the priests by violence, and did not refrain from beating such as would not give these tithes to them. Imagine being, you feel like it's your religious conviction to give tithes, and if you don't, you're not just going to be guilted or shamed, you're going to be beaten to get the tithes. And he also did not always distribute them as he should. He goes on and says, but as for the high priest Ananias, he increased in glory every day, for he was a great hoarder of money. So you have a greedy, corrupt high priest. Also, I thought about his end. What happens to Ananias in the end? There was a big revolt in AD 66 from the Jews. And some of you guys have been over there. Have you guys seen the aqueducts that are over there? Fascinating system that they built a long time ago that carries water from the sea into the city and provides the water. So during this revolt from the Jews, the rebels, they weren't very happy. And Ananias knew that. And a lot of them weren't happy with him. And so he tried to hide in an aqueduct. Josephus doesn't say if it was like up here, if it was in one of the tunnels. Try to hide in an aqueduct. The Jewish rebels find him and beat him and murder him on the spot. And I just feel like it's a bit ironic. You have the high priest, wealth, fame, place of privilege, and he meets his end in an aqueduct. It just kind of shows and nobody knows who Ananias is, right? Unless you're devout Christians and we're reading this and studying this, most people don't know Ananias, the high priest. But we do know Paul. And the words of Paul, more importantly, a prisoner. So it just kind of shows the upset down nature of the kingdom. And we see it all throughout Scripture. But I just thought it an ironic and somewhat unfortunate end that that's where a high priest is. That's where his legacy, his life ends, is there. Okay, the elders that they talk about that went down to Caesarea as well, members of the Sanhedrin. You guys know who the Sanhedrin are. About 70 members, plus the high priest, Ananias, and it consisted of chief priests, scribes, and elders. Same thing we see Matthew. Listen to this from Matthew 26. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of the law and elders had assembled. The chief priest and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for false evidence against Jesus so they could put him to death. Sounds very similar here, doesn't it? Looking for false evidences so that they could put Paul to death. Or at worst, just make sure he's in prison for the rest of his life. So not much has changed. They were typically wealthy and influential. A lot of them belonged to the Sadducean class, which, again, as we're talking about the resurrection, that's important to note. And their presence before Roman authority gave Paul's case institutional authority. So when the elders for the Sanhedrin go down to Caesarea, this isn't just some angry mob that wants Paul convicted. This is the chief ruling class of Jerusalem. They want Paul convicted. And look, Felix, we're all here. The ruling class. So it gives some weight to it, as Donnie was talking about. Okay. Tertullus, the Greek word that they used here for lawyer, means a trained speaker, a professional advocate, a courtroom orator. Roman courts had this formal operating, much like we do today. You know, you're supposed to say your honor or those kinds of things. They had the same thing. And Cicero said speeches often included at least these three things. And this word, do you guys know you can type something in Google and say, how do you say whatever? And sometimes it'll say it for you and pronounce it or give you a YouTube video. I did like 12 times for this word. Captatio I got down. This one is hard. But it basically means earning the goodwill of the judge. So that was common Roman. Like if you were going to get up as a lawyer and address the judge or the governor of a Roman courtroom, flattery. You had to get flattery. And then you bring your statement of charges, and then you bring your supporting argumentation, which is what Tertullus does. And so Ananias, the elders, they want to make sure that Paul is convicted, and so they bring in a lawyer of lawyers, the best one in the area, to try to help them convict Paul. And then we have Felix. Felix the governor. Served from AD 52 to AD 59. Interestingly enough, he was originally a slave. He and his brother Pallas, Paoas, was a slave. And Tacitus wrote that Felix exercised the power of a king with the mind of a slave. Under Felix, Josephus reports that there were revolts. Violence was used to suppress uprisings. Corruption was common. He actually had this, I don't know what you would call him, this private army that he would use to take out his political opponents. So not a great guy. Look at what Tacitus gives in his chronicle of history. He's talking about different kings and things like that. So Claudius is who Felix and his brother were slaves of. When Claudius entrusted the province of Judah to the Roman knights or to his own freedmen, one of whom was our guy Felix, he was indulging in every kind of barbarity and lust, exercised the power of a king and the spirit of a slave. He had married Drusilla, we'll talk about in a bit, the granddaughter of Antony and Cleopatra, and so was the grandson-in-law, as Claudius was the grandson of Antony. So just a little bit about this guy's backstory will be important as we go on. So he married Drusilla, who we later found out, what was her background? What was her heritage? Was she a Roman? I guess, but she's Jewish. Daughter of Herod Agrippa, sister of Agrippa II. So Felix, not only, Felix found his way to power, he was a slave of Claudius, but his brother became an important imperial official, Pallas, and helped him rise to power. And we'll see how he comes in time and time again for his brother, Felix. We'll see that later at the end. But Drusilla was already married to another king. And we'll see that later from another quote from Josephus. But he reports that Felix convinced Drusilla, because he thought that she was the most beautiful woman in all the land, to leave her husband Now, what actually happens is he's got a friend named Simon, who's also Jewish, who pretends to be a magician, and that's his wingman, basically. And sends Simon to go talk to Drusilla and say, hey, basically, you should leave your husband. You'll be a very happy woman being with Felix. And so she does. And we'll see why later as well. But as you saw, Paul will speak to them about righteousness, about self-control, and about judgment. Okay, it talks about Felix had a knowledge of the way. How do you think he had a knowledge of the way? They weren't known as Christians at this time, but as followers of the way. How do you think this Roman governor, they say he was well acquainted with the way? Not just I'd heard about it, but he knew specifics. He was well acquainted with it. How do you think that's the case?
They felt Paul was so important, they took 450 soldiers to escort him to Caesarea. That would be somebody that would have a wide-ranging reputation.
Yeah. Yes, it was possible that Paul's work was known well among the Roman government, at least in this area. Several reasons were given. Caesarea had a large Christian population, a large following of the way. As Mike was saying, maybe Roman officials already encountered these disciples and news of his mission spread widely. And then Craig Keener, who we've talked about a lot, references things, his work, suggested that Felix may have learned about the way from Drusilla. She was Jewish. Whether or not she was a good Jew, she was Jewish. And so, very possible that she had friends, relatives who had become followers of the way as well. So, regardless, he's well acquainted with Paul's belief system and with his speeches, what he says. Let's see. Yeah, so conflict between Jews and Gentiles. This is how the end of Felix's governorship went. A conflict between Jews and Gentiles in Caesarea led to violence. So the Jewish leaders sent a complaint to Rome. Rome doesn't like this instability, right? So that's a big deal. If you're a Roman governor and you can't hold down peace in your area, you're done with. Derek, can you read this quote from Josephus?
Now, when Porcius Festus was sent as successor to Felix by Nero, the principal of the Jewish inhabitants of Caesarea went up to Rome to accuse Felix. And he had certainly been brought to punishment unless Nero had yielded to the importunate solicitations of his brother Pallas, who was at that time held in the greatest honor by him.
I was confident you could say that well. That's why I want you to read it. That's good.
How'd I do?
You did great. So again, who helped Felix get into power when he was a slave? His brother. And then he had a wingman who helped him get his wife. And then now he is honestly supposed to be executed. He didn't do his job well, but his brother again bails him out. And this is the last in history that we hear of Felix. We think he just finished out his life without any upheaval, just done away with quietly. So that's Felix. We've covered a lot of information, so just choose your question, any one of these, and we'll discuss for a bit, or if you want to answer all of them, okay, just thought I'd give you the choice.
You know, if the high priest had not been corrupt, Jesus wouldn't have been crucified. And so you can see it's all part of God's plan, which is interesting to think about.
To think about corruption being necessary in order for God's plan to
Pride goes before a fall.
Yeah, and there was 20 or 25 or 30 years between Jesus' incident with the Sanhedrin and this with Paul. I mean, so this is not faith that just continues to
guys feel about this trend? There's a trend, I don't know, time is a blur, but a few months ago, a couple of years ago, where a woman would ask her husband, hey, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? You guys remember that trend on social media? Anyways, it was supposed to be like, well, all men think about the Roman Empire all the time. And it was so like, oh, maybe about once a week I think about the Roman Empire. That was not me. I did not spend my time thinking about the Roman Empire. But after reading all this and researching, and especially reading Josephus, I think, man, these people are corrupt. Like, it's fascinating. It's one of those things that's so bad you can't look away. You know what I'm saying by that? It's like you see their pride and their arrogance and their corruption. Man, how depraved can you be? You're the high priest, or you're a Roman governor, and this is what it's like. So, yeah, interesting.
I believe it's Josephus' writings, and describe in quite detail how the Christians were tortured by the Romans as well.
Yeah, probably so. I didn't read the entirety of his works, but it's a lot. Fascinating.
You know, and two, option two, when you listen to Paul, Paul still sees himself as Jewish.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, he adheres to the law and to the prophets, and I think one of the distinguishing thing for him is the fact that Jesus died and was resurrected. And that's the crux of number one too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if the resurrection was true, everything Paul said was true. If the resurrection was false, everything was false.
What is it? Drawing point. If it didn't happen, we would all men most be pitied. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting things. Okay. Let's talk about Tertullus, this lawyer. He presents his case before Felix. And here's how he does it. The goodwill of the judge, right? And I just thought this is ridiculous. What does he say? We've enjoyed a long period of peace under you. Your foresights have brought about reforms in this nation everywhere and in every way. Most excellent Felix, we acknowledge this with profound gratitude. Yeah, right. This guy's been corrupt, greedy, violent. You've enjoyed so much peace under you. Has to scratch his ego. So he does that. Cicero, remember, said you got to do that when you're in the Roman court. And then he makes 3 accusations against Paul. Number 1, political agitation. He stirs up riots among the Jews throughout the world. Romans did not look favorably upon sedition. And so framing him as a political revolutionary, that can make a strong case. Leader of a sect, he's a ringleader of the Nazarene sect. This word here means like splinter movement. And so again, this revolutionary is going to compromise your power in Rome, trying to appeal to that side. And then he says he even profanes the temple. He even tried to desecrate the temple. Remember Acts 21, when he was spotted with a Gentile in the city, and they just supposed that he brought the Gentile into the temple. No, he did not. And so they started this rumor. Which of these 3 do you think Felix in Rome cares about the most? The first 2, right? They don't really care who goes in the temple, who doesn't. That's your inner Jewish theological, whatever. You do that. You figure that on your own. But this guy's a revolutionary. If he's going to cause an uprising, if he's going to cause an uproar in my territory, that's not going to look good on me. I want to know about that. And so he tries to make a strong argument that Paul needs to be convicted, dealt with. And so, go ahead.
I was one of the, he's here representing all the important Jewish leaders. So separating Paul even more from them, like he's a ringleader of the Nazarene sect that kind of like protects. Yeah. It's like, we're the normal Jews that you're used to. Mm-hmm. And he's like something really different than us. Yeah. I imagine that's that's kind of a shrewd rhetorical move to keep that gulf between like Paul and his beliefs and what they believe.
And what's interesting is we're about to look here at Paul. He makes his case basically saying No, I'm not against people, you know. The God of our fathers, I adhere to the law and the prophets. So that was Tertullus's case to Felix. And then it says that Tertullus basically just looks at Paul and says, okay, you give your case now. And so Paul gets up, and he gives his case to Felix. And, you know, he does the captatio benevolentiae thing, but he doesn't flatter him. He does it, I guess, just for formality, but all he says is, I know that for a number of years you've been a judge over the nation, so I'm glad to make my defense. That's his earning the goodwill of the judge. I just got to do this for formality, but we both know you're not the guy that these guys say that you are. Then he appeals to facts. He says, look, I was in Jerusalem for 12 days. None of these people here have seen me do the things. I wasn't arguing. I wasn't stirring up trouble. Let's see. Oh, yeah. He just basically emphasizes there's no witnesses to what these charges are bringing against me. There's no eyewitnesses. And that was important because Romans valued eyewitnesses. And then in strategy 3, as we just talked about, he clarifies his faith. He says, I worship the God of our fathers. And he kind of frames Christianity as a continuation of Judaism, not a splinter movement, not a rebellion of it. And he emphasizes belief in the law and the prophets and the resurrection. And then again, at the end, he says, I don't know why I'm up here unless it's because of what I said to them, that I'm up here because of my hope in the resurrection. So that was Paul's case. And it says Felix was well acquainted with the way during the proceedings. Keener notes again that Roman officials are often familiar with Jewish sects because there were several. And so this wasn't something new, like, oh, within Judaism there was something else, like there were the Pharisees, there were the Sadducees, there were the Essenes. So it's likely Felix just saw this as, this is another disagreement internally. And then I thought this was, when Lysias the commander comes, that's wild. Why do you think does that stick out to you for any reason? If you look back at Acts 23, verse 26. Let's read Acts 23, verse 26.
Claudius Lysias to his excellency, the governor Felix greetings.
Lysias has already given Felix his account of things. Why is he going to wait for Lysias to come and give his case when he's already written the letter and sent it with the 400 Roman soldiers that were with him? I think, agree with the scholars, that Felix knew that Paul was not guilty of anything, at least in the Roman court, but he also knew that Jewish leaders would not be happy if he was not guilty, and he wanted to avoid an uprising. So he did what all good people do when there's a problem, they don't know what to do. They ignore it, right? So he says, well, I'll put Paul in jail, because I know he's not guilty, but I can't convict him of anything. But maybe if I just keep him in jail, that'll keep the Jewish leaders happy. And so that's where he's at. He's just in this middle ground of, I'll just put him in jail, give him a lot of freedom, right? Because I know he's not guilty. So I give him freedom, put him in house arrest, basically. But that'll appease the Jewish leaders as well.
Government bureaucracy at its best.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't do that. We don't ignore problems until they get better.
Puts me in the mind of when there's a difficult decision to make. You're either going to walk away from it or you're going to try harder.
Yeah.
Which has to do with being a Christian.
Yeah.
You're going to walk away from it, just try harder.
And Paul doesn't walk away from it. Right? He's resilient. He's persistent. Okay, so he's been in jail. Paul has, and then several days later, Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was a Jew, and he sent for Paul. And Paul taught them some of the gospel, and talked to them about righteousness, about self-control, and the judgment to come. And it says Felix was afraid. Why was Felix afraid?
Because he was starting to believe.
Yeah.
And what would that do to his position?
Right. Yeah, starting to actually believe the things.
Get knowledge of the way.
Yeah, he pieces start coming together. Remember how he and Drusilla got together? She was already married, right? Remember how he was corrupt and greedy? And all those things will come to an end at some point? I think in some way, Felix knew that this God, our God, is not just like the other ones. This is different. And I'm sure his wife knew that very well, too. Look at this quote from Josephus. But for the marriage of Drusilla with Azazus, I don't know, the first person she was with, the first king, it was a no long time afterward dissolved upon the following occasion. While Felix was procurator of Judea, he saw this Drusilla and fell in love with her, for she did indeed exceed all other women in beauty. It seems like Josephus agreed with Felix here. And he sent to her a person whose name was Simon. We talked about one of his friends, a Jew he was, and by birth a Cypriot, and one who pretended to be a magician and endeavored to persuade her to forsake her present husband and marry him, being Felix, and promised that if she would not refuse him, he would make her a happy woman. Accordingly, she acted ill. And because she was desirous to avoid her sister Bernice's envy, for she was very ill-treated by her on account of her beauty, was prevailed upon to transgress the laws of her forefathers and to marry Felix. And when he had a son by her, he named him Agrippa. Interesting knowing her lineage as well. And so now you have Drusilla in here. We find her depravity because she was unwilling to deal with her sister, have conflict, to make this relationship better, or to deal with some kind of past trauma, whatever Bernice did or said to her. And so she just tries to avoid it by marrying Felix and going away. It's just interesting to me that a Roman governor, the most powerful person in the room, in the area, is afraid from the message of a prisoner. Again, just the upside down world. As a wrap up here, it says that Felix was hoping for a bride from Paul, and again, how greedy can you get? You're hoping for the word for bride here that is used is monetary value. So you're hoping for a bride from Paul. You're a Roman governor, and you're trying to get money from a prisoner. I did say earlier that Paul had a collection that he gathered from the churches to give to the poor in the area. So Felix is basically a Roman governor taking away contributions from the poor, making them for himself. It reminds me of that John D. Rockefeller quote. You guys ever heard that one where somebody asked him, he was just filthy rich, and somebody asked him, how much money does somebody need to make to be satisfied? You guys know what he said? Man, does that ring true here? Scholars think that Felix here is someone who's experiencing a range of emotions. He's deeply curious about Paul's teachings, well acquainted with it, wants to learn more. But he's still very greedy, still very corrupt. And he's also afraid of Paul's teachings. You can just kind of feel, I'm saying you have to be sympathetic towards him, but you can kind of feel this conflict. Like he knows who he is not right. He's not willing to deal with it. He has the power, the prestige, those above him. There's just too many factors for him to really consider it.
Makes me think of the rich guy ruler of Jesus. He asks him what I need to do, and he says he'll sell everything, and and he goes away just kind of depressed. He's like, I was so ready to believe until it became that inconvenient. So it's almost like Felix is kind of in that, it's like, man, I could go for some of this, except, I can't let it upset my life.
I was thinking under corrupt leadership, it's not innocent until proven guilty, it's guilty until bought.
We don't change much, do we? As humans, like things around us change. I'll do all these things, but we don't change much. I love this class. I feel like it's easy for us to read a text and how can this apply to me today immediately and think, oh, well, if I'm Paul, I'm being persecuted. And that's fine. But one thing this class has done for me is it's humanized all these people. I never would have known anything about Ananias, about Felix, about Drusilla, and their backstories. But when I do, and it all comes together, I read a story like this and I think, man, am I like Drusilla? And I have conflict in relationships, and instead of trying to do the hard thing and work on that, I just want to avoid it. Am I like Felix, where I've heard the truth and it convicts me, but I'm not willing to do anything about it? Or I'm so greedy and lustful for power or fame or money, and that drives my motivations? Am I like Paul, where setback after setback, but I'm going to remain faithful. I'm going to be persistent and be resilient. And so, reading stories like this, I don't know about you, but I've been all three, right? I've had times in my life where I felt like a Paul, times where I felt like Felix, and times where I felt like Drusilla. So it just humanizes the story for me. And so I hope you guys are able to learn something from this, but also convict you in some way, but also encourage you. So, all right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Apologize for the long. Like it was a situation I had to deal with.
You're fine. You're fine.
Amazing job. Thank you so very much. Very
I'm glad we can.
Yeah. Yeah, finally we got together. No, really.
Yeah, I saw
Yeah, that's right. I think we've had this discussion before, but we both know. You said that in like, at some point in the last 10, whatever years, what you're talking about. Yeah, it's a rough life.
Yeah. But when we landed on Wednesday night at 3 a.m., all of a sudden, and then we landed Saturday in Memphis. And I think it was,
Yeah.
but I haven't had any events written, so I think it's what it was. It was so much Sunday morning. It started here, it's coming out of this one. It's a lot of blood.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So we didn't.
My whole life, it's been making those bleeds pretty regularly. Generally not like.
Have you read a cauterized?
No, I've heard about that, but this morning, I woke up from the pillowcase.
Really?
And that has not happened in a long time. I showed Jency, like, look at this, like, I mean, it's been.
You didn't wake up?
No.
That's scary.
I mean, it wasn't as much as,
Yeah,
like,
but
you're
still
saying.
in blood. And you had
Yeah, but it's just so strange. It's like, that has not happened a lot. Normally for me, it's, certain times of year especially, it's like all of a sudden it's like, you blow your nose or you sneeze or something, or it's like, whoop, it's going to trigger something. But they actually did do yours, like.
No.
Yeah, when I was a teenager.
Yes.
But I saw it from watching the after when I saw it. No, he's not.
Yeah,
This is the day before he started the next one. There's no way. There was, and it takes a better.
oh, so he's now,
He's not, like, this is.
he's not the president, starting, but he's actually, okay.
Yeah, so he's here, he's moved to Anderson, he's.
Okay. Yeah, I had never actually been introduced.
But then they texted me and said, yeah, he came to work in class, so he went to the family box right there.
You walked in, I was like, oh, man. It's like, and it's these chapters where, it's like you said, there's a lot there, but there's not that, it's like, you're not just like.
You really gotta try to make something of it.
I know, which I really realized,
But even if it's just for learning, but like, it's very interesting.
It is, but there, I feel like, I thought about this, last week when I was doing mine, I was like, bring a blanket on this end of X, it's like, let's see how much you can squeeze out.
It's just bad, I feel like I have to do that. Like, practical application that people are like, just learning. I spent 15 minutes on the
Yeah, no, it really is, but it's.
Things that he doesn't know that I know.
I feel that's what makes people here. If they just want pure practice.
Sure, he's in Central this last week.